Let's welcome in Beverly Hallberg, president at District Media Group and the senior fellow at the Independent Women's Forum. Beverly, great to have you with us.
Thank you so much.
Let's start with these Democrats now calling for ICE agents to be arrested. In Portland, you also have a city councilor named Mitch Green who's calling for the guardsmen there to reject deployment orders in response to the governor's assertion that guardsmen must follow the chain of command regardless of her personal objections. Watch this.
I respectfully disagree with the terminology in the oath of service. The oath of service says that you are obligated to follow the Constitution. You are to protect and serve the Constitution. Your duty is to the Constitution, and there may be times when you face an order from your chain of command that is illegal. And whether or not you follow that order in the moment is going to be a decision that any given soldier or airman or Marine is going to have to make based upon their moral compass.
Now, we also have this picture here, which apparently is a hit list of journalists, Beverly. Antifa wants to take these journalists out. What's weird about this part of the story is normally if you're having a legitimate protest, you want the media coverage so your story can be told to the world. But here we have Antifa looking to block journalists from covering this.
Yeah, and when you see this list and these reporters who are good reporters who want to ask good questions for people who are showing up at these protests, I think it actually underscores the claim that many of these protesters are paid. Because if they can't answer reasonable questions as to why they're there, what do they stand for, what are they against, then you have a problem. And so these photos, they look like mugshots of these reporters are being posted because those who are organizing these protests do not want people who attend to answer any questions, because you do get almost these gag reels that then circulate on social media because these individuals can't answer reasonable questions. So I think it's more about trying to silence protesters, which, as you were saying, is the exact opposite of what you typically are trying to accomplish when you're protesting.
Yeah, we're seeing some of the pictures of the journalists on this hit list now. Cam Higbee, Nick Sardor, Nick Shirley, Jonathan Cho, Andy No, just some of the names that the Antifa protesters, rioters, I like to say, want to avoid from these protests. Let's go back to these judges, or at least this one judge, this Biden-appointed judge, and Congressman Dan Goldman calling for the arrest of ICE agents. Like, they are trying to enforce the law, but here you have a judge and an elected representative calling to crack down on the ICE agents.
Well, it seems that this judge doesn't know the law very well, which of course is concerning for a variety of reasons. Let's look at the law. The law does allow for ICE agents to make arrests of undocumented individuals if there's, quote, reasonable suspicion. This can only take place in public because a warrant is needed if it's in a private employer or a private residence. But that's why you're seeing these arrests take place outside, and every person who is arrested under reasonable suspicion does have their day in court. The only ones who don't go through the court system are ones who already have and are already out there and subject to be deported immediately. So when you have not just a judge, but elected officials claiming that ICE agents need to be arrested, not only is that going against the law, you need to change the law then if you disagree with the law as it's being held into account, but also you're putting a target on the backs of those who are just trying to protect this country, who are just trying to do their job. It reminds me a lot of the whole defund the police movement, where we weren't defending the police. We were actually putting a target on their back for just trying to do their job. I find this absolutely atrocious that instead of elected officials, those who are judges, changing the law, the people who are just trying to do their job are the ones that are the targets.
And I think what you pointed out is very important. You don't actually have to have an arrest warrant many times to detain many of these people who have come in this country illegally. They are going through the judicial process, showing back up to court. That doesn't mean they have a right to be here according to the actual law. The laws have been bent. They've been, somewhat malleable based on the interpretation of the lenient immigration policy we've seen in years past and under Republican administrations, too, including George W. Bush. But things have changed recently. Let's also talk about the way ICE agents were attacked in Chinatown recently on Canal Street, going after these counterfeit goods. Beverly, you know this. I know this. Oftentimes, these counterfeit goods are made by slave labor in foreign countries, and particularly in China. And if you're here illegally selling counterfeit goods that are illegal, it seems like a pretty cut and dried case. So why do you think there was so much outrage from the crowd against the ICE agents in Chinatown?
Oh, I even want to back up just a little bit. I think the fact that so many of these individuals ran away from the ICE agents just implies their guilt already.
Yeah.
So it seems that there's a legitimate reason why this was taking place. Again, ICE agents have to do this in public, not behind private doors without a warrant. But the reaction to the ICE agents, I do think, is an extension of the speech, the political speech that we're hearing, especially from those in charge, from political leaders. And this is the concern that I have, even as a free speech absolutist. I think you should be able to say whatever you want, even if I find it heinous, but you can't incite threats against people. And we're getting to that point where there's a responsibility from our leaders to be able to point people in the right direction if they disagree with the law. Let's change immigration law if you don't like what's happening. Or if there is a bad actor within the ICE system, an agent who's not treating people with basic dignity and human rights, then let's actually go after that person in court. But to have this blanket thought that ICE agents doing their job when it follows the law does then lead to people who want to, in this case, riot against the actual ICE agents themselves. So I think especially with our elected leaders, they have a responsibility to point people in the right direction on how you fix things if you don't like what the current law is.
Yeah, and I think when you look at the protests in Portland, you go from the Pacific Northwest and Seattle to New York and everything that's happening on the East Coast, there are real signs that all of this is orchestrated. It's coordinated. There's a central planning commission setting up a lot of these protests, particularly what we saw on Canal Street.
Yeah, follow the money. And I'll just say about the National Guard and what President Trump has the authority to do. He does have the authority to protect these federal agents, federal buildings, regardless of what the locale may say about it. Now, I do think there's a distinction when it comes to federalism and when it comes to going into communities. For example, I think in order to go into Chicago communities from a legal standpoint, the mayor of that city or the governor of that state would need to ask President Trump to come in. So again, we have to go back to the law. What does the law say? And making sure that it's being followed to a T. But yeah, the rhetoric that we're seeing definitely is concerning. And if I was married to an ICE agent, I'd be pretty concerned about his safety.
Well, I think the one caveat to that, though, is if, federal property is endangered by these protests,
Correct.
Then President Trump has the right to send in the troops to protect that property. But,
Absolutely.
Again, the courts are weighing in on this. Ultimately, I think it will wind up in the Supreme Court. We'll see where it goes. We got more to come. Beverly is sticking around for another segment with us. President Trump responding to an article claiming that he is seeking $230 million from the Justice Department. We'll talk about what he wants to do with that money and why he thinks he is entitled to it. Also, a Maine Democrat has admitted to getting a drunken Nazi tattoo after a video surfaced. Guess what? After some pressure, he's now covering up that tattoo. But Democrats are still dismissing this as a no big deal thing. We'll talk about that as well. Coming up next.